Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. This week's project actually coincides with a request that I received from one of our fellow potters, Magdalena. She started pottery fairly recently and she mostly works on the wheel, but her work is incredible and you have to check her out. I will share all her details in the description below. Now, Magdalena has a bunch of events coming up, in the summer, and she wanted to get some ideas about, some smaller, easy to make, quick to make hand-built projects. And it so happened that I was working on an order for these cute little incense holders. So while I show you how I make these cute little incense holders, and also thought I'll share some ideas for these smaller pieces that you can hand build, that you can make for your in-person events. A lot of time what happens is when somebody sees you at these in-person events for the first time, they may not go in and buy the most expensive piece that you have to offer or the largest piece that you have. A lot of times people, when they see you, especially when they meet you for the first time and they get to know you about the first time and they love your work and they want to support you but may not want to buy a big piece, they will usually pick up something small. So it's a good idea to always have a mix of more expensive bigger pieces and a bunch of smaller easy on the pocket pieces. Good idea to have a good mix of both of these. So while we will make the incense holders today, I will also share some ideas on what are the other pieces which tend to do well for me, and probably that will give you some ideas to make some pieces for your upcoming event. So that's the plan for this video. Let's get started. Alright, let me start with some ideas for some smaller pieces that you can make for your in-person events or just for your own use if you want to. So these are little floral tea light holders or ring holders. This is actually just a floral cookie cutter that I've used. I've added texture, cut out the shape and then pressed it in foam to create these little dishes. Now I have them in a lot of different colors and they work really well as tea light holders. You can put a little tea light there, it works like that, or it can be little ring dish by a bedside table, and also can be a dip dish, for Tabasco and things like that. So these tend to do really well. They are really popular and people will usually buy 5 of them in different colors. So these are a good idea for your smaller pieces. Another idea is again these smaller trinket dishes, round trinket dishes. Again, these also I make using cookie cutters. Same thing, you add the texture, cut out the shapes and then press it in foam to get these round forms. Again, there are a few different sizes in these. Then you have these square ones, right? These also go with some platters that I have. I'll add 2 of these if it's a bigger platter as a little complimentary dish to go with the platter. Again, another cookie cutter with texture into a dip dish. These you saw last week, made with a stamp. This is a fern leaf impression on clay. Actually, this is porcelain on porcelain. It's another little trinket dish. Another idea is again small little bowls. Now this, I cut out the shape. I actually just drew out the shape of the flower, made these lines inside, the design inside, and that's it. And for this I actually added texture at the back first, then cut it out, then added this because you draw this in using your silicone tip tool, and made it into little flower bowl with a little circle disc as a base. So these could be little dip dishes again. So these are all different ideas. These are just some of the ideas that you can try. Again, they are quick, they're easy to make, they dry quickly, they're easy to glaze, and you can have a whole kiln full of these, and they tend to move usually faster because the price points are lower and people do find uses for them. They're cute, people find uses for them fairly easily, as little trinket dishes for the jewelry or for tea lights and things like that. So these are just some of the ideas. For today's video, we will be making these pieces. So this is the one that's already done, and I have an order to make a bunch of these. This will actually hold 2 of these together here, and that's a little butterfly incense holder. We'll be making 2 of these, and the intention with this was to make an incense holder, but it ended up being a little jewelry dish, and we'll be making a bunch of these. So that's the plan for this class. Now let's get started. Okay, so we start with a slab of clay. This is rolled to a 1/4 inch thickness. Actually, it's slightly thinner than that. It's slightly thinner because I'm making something small. So since this is the size we are making, which is really small, so I like to make them slightly thinner. So I've just thinned it down a little bit more. And I have already compressed the clay. I compressed the clay using the straight side of a rib. This is a Cheryl mud tool rib, and at an angle I go over the clay surface just smoothing out any texture and compressing the clay. That's my step 1, and I do this on both the sides, which I've already done here, so I'm not going to do it again. I'm just releasing the clay once so it's not sticking. Now to add the texture, I'm thinking of using this. It's actually a mat that is used for fondant, I believe, for cakes, and of course you can always use it with clay. So I'm going to be using this for my texture. If you're using it for the first time, I would suggest dusting it with some cornstarch, the clay surface and the mat. But since you can see this is already well used, so I'm just going to place it here. And to press this in, I'm going to be using a pony roller. So here's a little pony roller I have, or a brayer, whatever it's called. So all of these things will be linked in the description below. Okay. I'm just going over the surface to make sure I get a nice even imprint. Oh, that's lovely. And I'm placing it here and doing another round. Now I'll try and place it in a way that, so I'm trying to place it in a way so I get a continuous pattern. Let's see if I've succeeded at that. So we'll make a few out of this slab, and then we'll go on to the other pieces. So medium pressure, go over the texture. Yeah, so that's what I was trying to get, a continuous kind of pattern. Yes, there is a line here which we can always kind of take care of a little bit with a sponge. Honestly, once the glaze is on, it won't even matter. Now I'm going to release the clay before I cut it out. That's me releasing the clay. Now to cut this out, I'm going to be using this GR pottery form. This is 5 inches in diameter, and I've added a thin layer of foam at the back because I like these softer transitions rather than a harsh line, especially for my round forms. So this helps with that. So I'm going to just place it here for now, and we'll cut out a few. I want to make a few different things with it. Using my needle tool, just holding it straight and cutting the clay around the form. So all of this is going to get recycled. I'm just throwing it in a little bucket that I have under the table, which holds all my scraps. And this we're going to hold because you're going to use this to make the smaller incense holders. Now I'm going to bring in some smaller boards and my banding wheel, a cute little banding wheel. Place it here, place this on top, and I'm going to first start cleaning the rims. So I just either dampen my finger and go over the edges, making sure they're nice and soft and there are no clay crumbs. I just like a smooth rim. That's just a preference. And then I turn it around and do the same on this side as well. You can use a damp sponge. Remember, it's not drippy, it's a damp sponge. So we do that and take care of this at the back as well. While I'm here, I'm going to add my signature. Now I just got this cute little stamp which has my initial J. So I'm going to just place it here and press it in. That's cute. Okay, then we turn it around. Yes, you do lose a little bit of the texture here when you press it, but don't worry, we're going to place something in the center, so this will not really matter, so don't worry about that. So that's done. I'm going to do the same with the other two as well. Here's another one that I've made, little bisque stamp. Again, it has my initials J and K. Now we're going to start forming the mold. For that, I'm going to place this in the center. Try and find the center of the little dish underneath, and then just flip it down like this, and then I lightly just press around the edges to make sure that it conforms to the shape underneath. When you're doing this, it's a good idea not to press on the edge here, especially if you don't have the foam. If you press too much on the edge, it can crack the clay. So be careful. And even if when you have the foam in there, though it provides a little bit of cushion inside, if you press too hard, you're going to get the rough texture from the foam transfer onto the clay. So be careful about that. So I slightly press there, and then I'm usually pressing lower here at the rim. So I try and get the rim to conform to the shape of the form underneath. So I'm just turning, that's where banding wheel helps. You can just turn it around, and I'm just pressing here at the rim. Let me just show you. So this is where my focus is, this is where I'm pressing. That's done. Now since it's a small piece and my clay is not very floppy, I can actually just turn this around and release the form. So that's your first dish done. You can see how it has these smooth transition and not a harsh line there, and that's what I like, especially with rounder forms. So that's one done, and I'm going to do the same with the rest of the circles as well. Sometimes what will happen is, if your clay is if it's dried out a little bit, you'll start seeing these little cracks on the edges, where it's folding. Don't worry, just take a damp sponge and you can take care of those right here. Just add a little bit of moisture back in, and that's sorted. So that's your third one done. Now I'm going to bring in this slab here again and cut out a few different shapes. I'm thinking, before I do that, I'm going to get rid of the texture. I'll just take the yellow rib, and get rid of the texture there. Then I have these cutters. Again, all of this will be listed. I'm going to just bring in this cutter and place it here. Cut out a little butterfly. Then I have this little bow. Those of you who follow me on Instagram know I'm a little bit in a bow phase right now. Now I need a little floral one, and here's a little flower cutter that I have. Again, now before I attach them, I'm going to just clean off the edges. Just take care of the edges with a damp sponge. Go over the edges and clean them up. What I'm going to do is just press it a little bit, flatten out the petals a little bit, spread them out a tiny bit, and also shape it. If you see, I'm also shaping the flower. And while I'm here, I'm going to get my little silicone tip tool and add some details here, just a few lines. That's a little flower done. I'm going to do the same with my butterfly as well. So that's our butterfly done. I'm just going to shape it a little bit because it's going to come up like this, a tiny bit. Like I said, this is recycled clay. That's why it's a little bit more worked out than a fresh clay, which is a lot more plastic. Okay, that is done. It's time for the bow. Again, I'm going to clean it up. So that is done too. Lift it and shape it a tiny bit. Now we bring in our, and we start adding these. Now I'm going to start with the bow. I'm going to place it here somewhere in the center. Okay, just make sure this is slightly lifted, so it gives it a little lifted look in the center. Or the other idea is to actually place it on to the side here and make it into a little jewelry dish. I like the look of it better on the side, so that's what we're gonna do. Change of plans. It's a little jewelry dish. So I bring in the serrated, this wire tool, dip it in water and score here. Again, I like to add water and score, and that works for me. Okay, I do that there and I do it here as well. If you see, because I've dipped it in water and added, and I'm scoring here, it's creating the slip right here from the piece that we are attaching. So place two of them together here and just press it along. Just light pressing motion. Okay, if you want to, you can shape the bow a little bit, make it a little bit more fluffy, however you want to. Make sure it's attached at least at one point. Now you can convert this into an incense stick as well, where you add the little ball here at an angle so the incense can kind of stand like this instead of straight up and down. But that's a little jewelry dish. That wasn't the plan, but well, here it is. Now we move on to this one. I'm going to bring in my flower. Again, I'll score this pretty aggressively. I dip it in water. I dip my wire tool in water and score it. You'll see there's a lot of slip that's generated there. Same with this one. I dip it in water and score here. If you need to add, if it's part of your process where you add additional slip, please do that. Don't worry about how I'm doing it. It's just a personal preference. And then I'm just pressing it nicely so it stays there. It stays in shape, it stays there. And also it forms a little flower there. Now what I'm going to do is take a little bit of clay, form it into a ball, because this is the portion which is going to hold the incense stick. So we form it into a little ball, and I'm adding a little bit of moisture back in because my clay is drying out, so I'm adding a little bit of moisture back in. Again, I'm not very precise about what is the size, just a little thing which can sit in the center. And again, you're scoring here and creating slip, scoring and dipping in water and scoring. And just place this here on top and press. Okay, you'll see while you do that, a little bit of the slip has actually squeezed out. Now we'll just clean it up right here when we can. I'm going to take a synthetic brush, dip it in water, take off the excess, and then just go around cleaning up the slip. Okay, so I like to do a lot of the cleanup work right here. And if you need to kind of soften the edges of the flowers, you can do that while the clay is still soft. It's a little less effort, that's all. I can see a few sharp edges, so I'm just taking care of them right here. Alright, so that is done. I think that looks pretty cute. What I'm going to do is to add the hole in the center for the incense stick. I'm going to use my needle tool and just go straight in, and I'm going to go all the way, almost all the way, and then I just make a little bit of circle going round and round like this. Because we need it to be slightly bigger, it is going to shrink. It should be big enough to at least hold 1 to 2 incense sticks. So I just make sure that I pull the circle out a little bit so it's long enough, so it's big enough, because it's going to shrink. So we need a little bit of space for that. And then damp finger and clean out the edge. Okay, so that's your little incense holder done. Come to the last one. This is for the butterfly. Now for the butterfly one, you can either place a circle in the center. I like to place a circle in the top. So when I'm adding the butterfly, I add it slightly off the center, not exactly in the center, but slightly lower. So I can place my little ball of clay here on top for the incense stick. Alright, so this is what this looks like. So these are two incense sticks and a little jewelry dish made the exact same way. And now let's make this one. This is another idea that you can use. Now for this I did use a cookie cutter, but the only thing to remember is, now if you see the size of this one is compared to this is much smaller. And one question that kept coming up over and over again was that, is it too small for the, as the incense stick burns, it has some of the burnt incense that falls, so is it big enough to hold that? I think it works. I did try it in my studio. If there's no wind blowing, it works, it'll fall in. But if there's wind blowing, obviously it's going to fall everywhere else. So that's why it helps to have a slightly bigger dish underneath. That's why this is the size I'm going with for this round of incense holders. But this is another idea. You can have a stamp on the side with a little ball of clay in the center, and it's made exactly the same way. The only difference is that I've used a cookie cutter. You can actually cut out scallop edges and make this. Now let's make, but again in little incense holder, a lot of people I believe would enjoy, but this is for the cone incense. You can put the cone incense in there and it holds that. We make this part, the flower on top, and then I bought some of these flat wooden discs from Amazon and I just glued them on top of this, and these look like a cute little incense holder. So I'll show you how I made this. Very simple. Again, I'm going to take my clay. I'm going to get rid of the texture. My clay might be too stiff for this, but we'll see. Okay, so we get rid of the texture. And then I have these little cookie cutters. I'm going to take this. So when I make these, I make a whole bunch of them in one go because they're fairly easy to do, and you can actually make quite a few. So for this, it's better to have soft clay because you need to do a little bit of pressing motion, and it makes more sense to have softer clay. So I'm just adding a little, I'm getting rid of the sharp edges, and I'm adding a little bit of moisture back into the clay because I need it to be softer. Now for this, what you have to do is basically slightly damp fingers, and I'm pressing it and I'm cupping it up like we did with the other flower. I'm pressing it, so I'm pressing it like this, pinching it basically with these two hands at the base, giving it this, and then pressing from the center, from the top. So that is the motion, and that's why it's good to have softer clay, because then you're able to do this much better. You get a much better impression and shape. So that's a little shape that you get. I think I pinched a little too hard. Okay, just cleaning off the base in case there are any harsh edges. Basically, that's what you get. Similarly, for the smaller flowers, you do the same thing. A little board. I place this here, and then again the same process, dip it in water, score it, same thing here, dip it in water and score, and then I'll just make sure that I have these smaller petals sitting in between the other two petals, right? So just press this in. Okay, that's one done. And then I just like to press at the center, and that's why I keep it on a board. I do the pressing thing on a board, so it's you don't have to move it immediately. And this is what it looks like. Once it dries out, I glaze it, and then I'll paste it on this little disc of little wooden disc. Oh, I have a cone incense right here. So this is the idea. This is what it should look like. Let me show you here. This sits here on top of this, and this is what it's supposed to look like. So that's the idea. You just place it here, and that's how you get that. So that's our video for this week, where I've made a bunch of little incense holders, a little jewelry dish, So that was the video for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any ideas, suggestions for future videos, please let me know. Share them in the comments below. Next week, my plan is to actually glaze the bowls we made a couple of weeks back. So that's the plan. Let's see if it happens. In any case, I will see you next week. Bye for now.